Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Dan Digman.
And hi, this is me, Jennifer Digman.
Welcome to the 28th episode of A Couple Takes on MS. We are here, we both have multiple sclerosis. I have relapsing remitting.
And mine is secondary progressive.
And what we're going to talk with you today about is traveling with multiple sclerosis and when you're traveling with a wheelchair. I think that now that we're in the middle of March, it's about time to start making summer travel plans, and we just want to give you some tips to make things easier for you because as two people living with MS and one of us in a wheelchair, we've had some experience dealing with it.
Absolutely, and it is, any sort of traveling is a little more complicated. When you have a chronic illness, let alone having a chronic illness, being the caregiver for someone also living with MS in a wheelchair. So our first tip is just basically do your homework and get ready for your trip just so that you're prepared, because it always feels better when you know what you're about to embark on. And I think embark is a good word because Dan and I have been married for 12 years, but we've been together for 15. And our first trip together was a road trip.
And I think that's really, when you're thinking of traveling, I think when we started out too, it's just, just making smaller trips so that you know what to expect, what to look for, what you can and can't handle. And I think making the road trips, I think our first really big one was when we went back to visit my family in Iowa, which was probably about 540 miles away?
Yeah, from Michigan to Iowa is a little over 500 miles. It typically takes us about 9 hours to make that drive. So it's a good first trip, to drive together. And there are a lot of tips that we have, but I think the best tip for taking a road trip is to start with a full tank of gas, both literally and figuratively. You want your van to be filled up before you go, but you also want your own body to be filled up. So get your rest and make sure that you're ready to embark on this trip.
And I think something that we learned too is it really helps, and it sounds pretty elementary, but seriously, just to pack everything the day before. I think we had gotten to the point where we were just throwing stuff in the suitcase the day we were about ready to make a 9-hour drive. And so
that's a little unneeded stress to add to yourself. Dan will laugh at this, but as a ride shotgun with Dan driving, I get stressed out. I don't enjoy driving through Chicago. Love that city as I do, but the traffic is always a little stressful. And so if you start by packing a couple days before, you don't start with your gas tank kind of empty. You'll have the energy so that you won't maybe get stressed and freak out in Chicago. So I think that's important, and it's always, it's important to be flexible. And so if you are getting closer to a city and you realize I'm too pooped to do this right now, we still have a couple 100 miles to go. Be flexible and stop if you have to. But I think another really important thing that we've realized in our road trips is that salt can be your friend.
I think, every night, the night before every road trip, or every time we're traveling, we get a pizza. Just a straight up, just a pepperoni pizza because of the salt.
And I think any of you out there listening that have multiple sclerosis, or even if you're a caregiver for a loved one with MS, you understand that the bladder is he's a finicky little guy, especially when you're taking a road trip. And so it's good to start with maybe it's not the best dietary choice, but sometimes just to make yourself a little more prone to retaining water, and pizza the night before helps that, so you won't have to make a plethora of stops and that wastes energy.
And I think that too, because and also then and it hurts me a lot. But as we're driving, I don't drink coffee on the trip early on because the caffeine and liquid. Living with MS myself, it's just like you have to stop the bathroom, and I think that's what we've learned too, is the second you make one bathroom stop, then so it's like always get a lot of driving out of the way.
Yeah, it reminds me of my college drinking days. The first time you break the seal, and a 21-year-old drinking beer to a 40-something with multiple sclerosis making a road trip. Then once you stop that first time, you will find that you stop more frequently. So if you can eat pizza the night before and make yourself a little bloated where you're not having to go, that maybe isn't such a bad thing.
And I think something that we were really afraid of when we first traveled like that is, where are the accessible bathrooms? The rest areas are perfect. I think your public rest areas on interstates, more often than not, will at least have fully accessible stalls.
And the interesting thing is about Dan and I traveling together, of course, it's a man and a woman. So family restrooms really are a humongous...
A godsend.
Yeah, a godsend. Nice choice of words, Dan.
Amen.
But family restrooms really make our traveling easier because we can go into the bathroom together. But even if a rest area, for example, doesn't have a family restroom, most rest areas are fully staffed where someone will be willing to close down one side of the rest area so that a man and a woman can use the bathroom together. You just have to ask, and that's a really important tip to traveling with MS is just don't be afraid to ask. You need to make people aware of what your needs are. So when you have to go to the bathroom with your husband and there's not a family restroom, just ask and they'll close down the stall.
It is very encouraging just how friendly people are and how willing they are to help you. I think then the other thing when we're talking bathroom stops, for both of us, always have, pack. We always joke about packing a carry-on for our travel, for our road trips.
And if you're not picking up what we're putting down, we're just being very honest that sometimes accidents happen. Again, that finicky bladder, sometimes you'll get to the rest area, you'll get out of the car, you'll try and stand up, and it's like, oh, your bladder said, nope, right now I think you're going to need to change your clothes. So that's why it's important for us to pack an extra change of clothes, which we lovingly refer to as our quote-unquote carry-on.
Well, and I think something we've learned too, as much as the talking about you and having a carry-on, it's reality. I also have MS. We have a thing in the back seat too, or in the back of the van. If I can't make it to the bathroom, I'm able to go to the bathroom there. Not just because reality hits, and MS bladders, you can't hold it.
It's not always ideal, but it's better to be prepared to have that carry-on or your supplies so that you don't wreck your trip. Certainly when you're first starting out on your travels, just what a bad thing to be like, oh, my clothes are wet, and your mood is soured. Just pack a little extra, and that's important. And then when you get where you're going, you will be in a better place. And where you're going oftentimes is to a hotel.
And I think, when you're not dealing with just a quick day trip, we need, most times, you book a hotel. And that's always key, too, when you're dealing with multiple sclerosis. And if you have a wheelchair, it's just like the big key is knowing what to ask for when you're booking your hotel room.
Absolutely. And even if you are making, like I said, you don't get everywhere that you're planning that first night, and you have to stop somewhere, to be able to say, I need a barrier-free room because, for example, I have a large wheelchair, or I need a roll-in shower if I'm going to be at a hotel for a few days. Just to have that language and to know what you're asking for. I need grab bars. I need a taller toilet. Those things, that's really important. You may say, oh, I just need an accessible room. But if you can go into detail a little further, you and your spouse or you and your travel partner will really appreciate your specific needs.
Exactly, and I think I was just trying to think what word. Oh, it would be specificity. Yes,
Exactly. And it's a little early in the day and I haven't had a whole ton of coffee. So I just went specifics.
Well, it's like change it. I think that, and when you're making, I see. I think this is your thing because I always make you make the reservations.
Yes, I'm friendly and I don't mind chit chatting.
And I think that it's always what I've been impressed with you is just being blunt and asking them. Okay, this is what I need for the room. Don't rely just on the person at the hotel to say yes, it is accessible. Ask them and just say, does it have a grab bar on this side, or is it accessible? Is it a roll-in shower? I mean, because what's so nice is most times if you're dealing with like the hotels, and I think, find a hotel chain or chains that you're comfortable with and know that their rooms are going to be perfect for you. But you ask them, they'll call you back. They'll run and they'll check and they'll call you back to say,
and
this is what we have. And
certainly that person working at the front desk probably appreciates getting away from said front desk for a few minutes to go check out a room just for a little break in his or her monotonous moments, which having a job can sometimes present. So I think that is important. And like Dan said, I'm weak on my left side. So I prefer a restroom with a grab bar on the right. And that is that specificity that he mentioned. I really benefit from having the grab bar on the right side. So I don't feel strange asking that is what I need. And this trip is going to be fun for me. And it'll be even more fun for Dan if we are getting the things that we need out of our hotel room that we're paying for.
And I think that's key. You're paying for this. I mean, you are paying for this room. I think the other thing then is so you do all this pre-planning. You have these conversations on the phone as you're booking the room. So you show up to the hotel and check in. There's been several times we get there, we get inside our room, and we just realize this is not going to work for us. So it's interesting then to go back up to the front desk and say, do you have anything else?
And oftentimes, and I'm sure people know what we're talking about, you'll see a cluster of hotels off the expressway. So if you go to Hotel A and their rooms don't fit your needs, maybe they try and help you, but they instead have to refer you or recommend you go to a different hotel. Don't be afraid to move and look for something, because you certainly don't want to spend your money on a room that doesn't fit your needs. And that's, much like when you go into a restaurant, if they don't have the food that you're looking for, you wouldn't pay for a meal you wouldn't want to eat. Don't pay to stay at a room that doesn't have the accommodations that you need.
And something that you also have to look for, when I think why you're asking for a barrier-free room, think of all the clutter that a lot of hotel rooms have.
Yes.
And just places. And I think what works for us, sometimes I have to rearrange the furniture. And fortunately, I still can do that, like lifting or moving a nightstand or an end table or a coffee table just out of the middle. But don't be afraid then to ask if you can't move the furniture or you aren't able to lift it, to ask the hotel staff, housekeeping, and they're always willing.
Yeah, they're always willing. That's a good point, Dan. I guess I'm really, really lucky that I have someone who's willing to remodel the rooms every once in a while when we are traveling. But it's worth it. And so if you're driving, it's important to stop for the night. But once you master the road trip, which I think both Dan and I feel like we have.
Knock wood, yeah.
Knock wood, we've started flying. And flying can be a frightening proposition, especially if you're in a wheelchair. Because I have to pack away and let somebody take my chair away from me and hopefully take good care of it. I don't know how people travel with pets. I mean, I'm worried about a thing with an inanimate object is feelings. But you have to worry. I mean, this is my transportation. My legs don't work. So you have to be really, again, doing your homework so that you get to the airport and you can get your wheelchair on the airplane safely, and you know that it will be returned safely.
Well, I think that's the big thing is, so when you call and make your plane reservation, look online and find the number that you should call for accessible transportation.
Because most airlines have a dedicated phone number to make accessible transportation, accessible flights, excuse me. I need to know the specifics, and this again ties back to doing your homework. I need to be able to tell the airline exactly how long my chair is, how high my chair is, what type of battery it has, if it can fold to a smaller space, or because honestly, there are some airplanes that are too small to fit Grape Ape, which is my name for my wheelchair. So, you have to have those specific dimensions and facts about your chair.
As you were saying, speaking of the facts, I mean, just to know how much the chair weighs. I think, because then they decide then how and where in the cargo hold that will go. I think it is just knowing those specifics. Wait, I lost my train of thought. Help me.
And we were just talking about knowing the weight and the dimensions, but also my chair has legs. I always call them legs. But they have the parts that fold off and that hold my legs, and so that we have to take off before flying, and we have to find a suitcase, like a carry-on, that we can put the legs of my chair or the headrest. So again, you have to do a little more packing, and you have to figure that out. Dan is so cute. He has a picture on his phone of exactly how my legs, if you all can visualize what I'm talking about, the little...
Well, the legs, because Jennifer has a big power wheelchair, like complex rehabilitative technology kind of chair.
Right.
But it's like the legs that'll come off. But, so to pack that into a carry-on, it's like you have to, it's like a little map that I have to consult. It's like, how does the chair go in? And not only with your legs, but if we're actually taking your headrest and then the battery pack that goes with it, that's just, and that involves some of the stuff with your travel. And that's why when you're traveling by airplane, make sure you're packing efficiently. If you can do something where you can pack everything into a carry-on, that will avoid the need to get your luggage at the carousel after the fact, because the reality is, if you're in a wheelchair, the cool thing is you're the first one on, but in biblical sense, the last one off.
Yes, you're the last one off. So you have to be able to know that you're going to get transferred from your standard wheelchair into an airplane skinny little wheelchair to get you to your seat, and then you'll get transferred again into your airplane seat. And then once the flight is over, after everyone gets off the plane, then you will be transferred again, and then transferred to your regular wheelchair. So it's just something to think about. It adds a little time, but it's worth it if you want to travel, just to do a little homework, to find the airlines that treat you well, and then to support them in loyalty, appreciate it. We've been in, this is just our experience, but Dan and I have had really good experiences with Delta Airlines, and so that typically is the airline that we choose to fly on.
Well, and they
fly with.
And I think it's and that it's not like a endorsement necessarily for Delta, because I know there's people who travel who have had great luck with other ones, but I think that's where it's easy with all of these things with Priceline, with this everything, to find cheaper airlines. I really think that when you're dealing with wheelchairs and traveling like that, loyalty pays, because you can call the airline. They have all your information in there. It's like we planned a trip out to DC we knew that we could travel with the wheelchair here, but then when we look to travel to New Orleans, they know that their airlines can't accommodate your big chair, so we
Right.
knew we had to find other alternatives. But it's just, you know, again, I
That
guess,
again, that loyalty where
yeah.
they know you and they know what dimensions and specific details of your chair. So I think that's really important. And again, that's a little more of the homework that you need to do to make that reservation. But then the day of the travel, arrive at the airport early. You again don't want to be stressed out, much like packing the night before. You don't want to get to the airport stressed out and frazzled. You want to have smooth sailing through TSA
I was going to
security.
say to get through the
So
security.
that's important to think about what you're wearing, like wear shoes that you can slip on and off, or wear clothing that's easily, padded down. And so think about that. There is a lot of homework again with traveling with a disability, but it pays if you think about those things: what you're wearing, what you're packing.
Because you always talk like you know that because you have to sit in the aisle chair, you don't wear pants that have big pockets or
No.
that or baggy pockets that stick out. They get caught on the chairs as you're going down the aisle.
Right, that's true. And, if I know I'm going to get picked up, which I will, someone has got to transfer me from my wheelchair and my airline seat. So you have to think about that, like what clothing will be smart to get transferred and what will be, the safest and most user-friendly for both the person working for the airline and for me and Dan as he makes transfers after the flight. So that's important. And we think about that.
Well, and then I think once you're on the ground, once you're at your destination,
Yeah.
if you're traveling, you have MS, and you have a wheelchair, I mean, you have to start thinking about what kind of ground transportation is going to get you and your wheelchair from the airport to your hotel, and that again is where you need to do your homework.
And there are a number of places that are accessible, that have accessible transportation. Airlines, often when you get off an airline and you get to help me out here,
Like the taxi service
the
or the
taxi
cab
service. There you go. A number of taxis and cab services have accessible cabs. But you don't maybe want to wait until the moment your flight arrives at the destination to say, oh, by the way, I need a wheelchair accessible taxi cab. And maybe that'll work for you if you're in a larger city. But if you're using a smaller airport that maybe doesn't have a number of accessible cabs to, again, do your homework and make those preparations before you land, you'll thank yourself because traveling is tiring. So you want to do as much as you can to conserve your energy and to conserve your caregiver's energy or whoever's traveling with you.
Well, and I think that, and then it ties back to your tip for being flexible. I mean, I know when we recently flew to Tulsa, we did our, or no, it was Nashville. We did our research, and we had booked an accessible van. Well, said accessible van had an easy lock in the middle of it that didn't fit Jennifer's chair. So then we had to, they found us another cab, but then it's so frustrating where you see all these cabs come and go picking people up, and we just, because we had to sit and wait for another accessible chair. I mean, don't be angry about it. I guess I was
We
just,
had to wait for an accessible cab
yeah.
that would pick us up. And sure, when you first get there, you're like, oh, this is fun. We're enjoying the city. But, I want to see the city more than just the airport. So it is be flexible and wait. And, most things, the airport, the airline, someone will help you. And that is really important just to know that people are there to help. And again, don't be afraid to ask questions
and I
do
think
research.
that was the big thing, because when one time, like when we went to Tulsa, it was not easy to find a cab service that provided for wheelchair transportation. Look, when we did this, we found it was Health Rides, and it was a place that did their job was to provide transportation for people in wheelchairs, like with their medical needs.
Right, and how did you find Ladon and Health
Ladon and
Rides?
Health Rides. It was through the National MS Society that they recommended us or referred, and she was like, that was like one of the best services ever. I mean, that's what they did, was to provide accessible transportation for people with wheelchairs to their doctor appointments, but they also provided this kind of transportation from the airport to the hotel and just when we were in Tulsa throughout town. So look to that for maybe if you can't find accessible cabs when you're traveling, that works perfectly, I think.
So reach out to resources like the National MS Society or the MS Foundation. Look online or reach out to your community on Facebook or Twitter and just reach out to others who are traveling with a disability, whether it be MS or anything. I mean, we're all here for each other, and I think that that's really important, is to reach out and ask for help if you need it. But enjoy traveling, and don't let the fact that you have a disability keep you from enjoying travel.
I think it's just, and hopefully that with these tips, I mean, you can learn more on our website at danandjenniferdigman.com, or I know that we had written an article on Healthline that have tips like this, and the tips are out there. I mean, and just ask the questions, or reach out to us at danandjenniferdigman.com, or if I'll ask us on Twitter at danjendig, just to say, okay, this is what I'm looking for. I mean, but just always do your homework, but also be willing to ask the questions to get the answers you need, because traveling is, it helps keep you, in touch with the rest of the world, and you can enjoy yourself with your friends and family.
Absolutely. So thank you to the Blue Giraffe Kid for creating our music, and thank you to MS&Me Radio Network for airing our show. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again.